All right, everybody, welcome to the Federal Benefits Show. My name's Alex Wellings. I am your host. Today we're talking all about the L Fund in your TSP, and we got a real special guest, Mr. Caine Crawford. Caine is 20 years in the financial business, 10 of the last years, or the last 10 years, I should say, helping federal employees understand their benefits. And we're delighted to have him talk a little bit more on the federal, the TSP and the L Fund and the new changes that are coming into play. A lot of those, or at least one of them, the 2020 fund, coming to its target date already. Wow, time flies. But Caine, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Alex. Glad to be here today, bud.
So today we're chatting all about the L Fund, like I said. Caine, you are the owner, the founder of FEAG, a strategic partner of FEBA's here, and one of the first to receive our federal retirement consultant designation. You've been doing this a long time, wouldn't you say?
Yes, sir. It's been quite a ride.
So I know when we chatted about doing this episode, we had you had mentioned there were a lot of changes going on in the L Fund. And you wanted to chat a little bit about that because it's one of those things that comes up a lot in conversation. There's a lot of folks that have kind of set their TSP investments on the set it and forget it route, we call it. And that is the L Fund for those invested in the TSP. So I know you wanted to chat about it, but what are kind of the major changes that have gone on or that are going to be going on with the L Fund, with regards to the L Fund?
Well, there's a lot of good stuff going on, and I guess, when the TSP Modernization Act of 2017 kind of kicked off, one of the things that they knew they wanted to change was to implement an additional set of funds that brought people a little bit closer to their actual target retirement date, and that would have been a 5-year increment instead of a 10-year increment.
Right.
As everybody knows, we've got the 2020, the 2030, and so on. Now we're going to have a 5-year. So this year they're going to be adding a 2025, a 35, a 45, and a 65, in fact.
Oh, wow.
So
Okay.
It just gives people a little more ability to pick a target date that's more close to their retirement date if they're retiring, mid-decade.
Okay. So for all those that don't know, that are listening or watching the show, what is the L Fund primarily? Like, if you had to define it, what does it mean? Why do people invest in the L Fund over, say, just putting money in the GF, CS, or I Fund?
You said it, kind of a minute ago, that the set it and forget it thing is what a lot of folks, I guess, tended leading towards. My dad was a Department of Defense guy for 30 years, and he always jokes about the easy button. As
Right.
a federal employee, it's like, oh gosh, we got enough stuff to do. Certain things in your life, just get the easy button. And I think that's really what the L Funds kind of, created for a lot of federal employees, was just a way to not have to stress about which fund they should be in, when should I be moving up and down with the market, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And when they brought this L Fund strategy out, the book says it's professionally determined investment mixes that help people throughout their career. It's being
Right.
adjusted quarterly. They don't have to worry about it. So that's what I hear from a lot of folks. I just didn't know where to go, and I'm retiring in 2035, so I chose the L2040 fund.
Right.
And that's kind of what they were they were decided, or they were kind of built for that reason.
Right. And so it's just a mix, though. Like, one of the big misconceptions I've seen across our dealings in the Fed space, or the federal employee space, has been that they think potentially the L Fund is different from, say, the other funds, the GSC and I Fund, but it's really just a combination of those funds, right? It's just it's different mixes based on your target retirement date, right?
Exactly. The way I try to explain it in my class when I'm teaching for the agencies is, because a lot of folks, it's interesting, the financial knowledge level of people is obviously across the board in any industry, let alone as a federal employee. But I get a lot of folks that kind of relate the C, the S, the G, and the F to being almost more of, hey, that's a fund, like it's a stock fund, like I know what that one is, it's risky, or I know what the G is, it's safe.
Right.
And the way I sometimes explain the actual L funds is, I ask people if they know what a mutual fund is. Most people say, well, yeah, mutual fund is a bunch of different companies or a bunch of different funds grouped into one group. I said, well, that's kind of what the L funds are. They're basically a mutual fund of those 5 funds.
Right.
The mix is based on your target level of risk in terms of if you're a 2050, it's going to have more CS&I than GNF.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a lot of folks they grasp that idea when they once they understand it anyway.
Now, one of the things when I think about the L fund is that shift from, okay, I'm going to retire well, first off, I should mention this. It's not about when you're retiring that you should select it. It's when you plan to take that income from that account is what you should plan your target date for. So if you're planning to draw assets, and most people that coincides with their retirement date, I'm going to start drawing on that asset when I retire. But for the select few that aren't planning to do that, make sure that the target date fund or the L fund that you choose is the date or around the date within, I think, 4 years, and now they're going to do the 5-year segments of when you're going to draw on that asset, not just retire. So if you're going to retire in 2020, but you don't plan to use that asset till 2030, it's isn't that the case, right, Caine? Isn't that right?
That's definitely a strategy. It depends on what they're using it for. If it's got to be a certain number at that certain time, maybe there's some differences. But yeah, that's ideally. It was designed based on your retirement date with that thought, like you said, that people are going to retire, and this TSP is a third of their their benefits,
right.
They're a third of their retirement income. So, but yeah, if you are the one who say, hey, I'm 56, I'm retiring as early as I can, probably won't touch this till I'm 72 when I'm told to by the IRS, then yeah, maybe the 2020 this year wasn't the right fund for you because you potentially got 14, 16 years of investment time frame left.
Right. Now, another thing that I hear a lot is when my target date hits or my 2020 year hits or that year gap from 2020 to 2024 hits, what happens to the fund? Does it stay in L 2020, or I know there's the L income fund? Is that what happens? It shifts over to there?
Yeah, so basically the L income fund, as a lot of folks may or may not know, is being reallocated and watched on a daily basis, right? And all the other funds are being watched on a quarterly basis. So this July, when the L 2020, becomes, at its fruition, it's over, it will basically roll into the L income fund because they're done running that 2020 on a quarterly basis. After second quarter, basically, they're going to say, we're going to be turn this one right back into the L income. And a lot of folks haven't actually watched the L income fund enough to know what that even really means to them. But if you look at the percentage of the funds in each allocation of the 2020 or the income fund,
mm-hmm.
at this point, they're almost identical already.
Yeah,
there's 1 or 2% difference is all.
I was just looking at it. Yeah, it's and that's we're gonna make sure that gets popped up on your screens here. But yeah, that's interesting. So it can coincides, but then it'll shift based on that. That's one of the more. I guess they're all pretty actively managed, but that is one that's designed to keep people, I guess, in tune with inflation. So as the costs of goods go up, their gains in the L income fund should exceed that. Is that their goal there, or do you know what their goal of the L income is?
The way I understand it, the way I try to explain it to folks is if you're actively spending money out of an account, you can't run with the risk of like the L 2050 fund where there's a lot of CS&I.
Right.
So a lot of the time, that L income fund is meant to be a very small loss ratio. But when you're watching it to cut losses, you're also inadvertently cutting gains at the same time.
Right.
So it doesn't gain a lot, but it doesn't lose a lot. Year to date, that L income fund is about 0.5% positive, where the L 2020 is only about 0.2% positive. So it's meant to be a little safer.
Okay.
And as you can see, those two numbers, that's just doing its job. But it was negative, just like all the rest of them were at a certain point in time.
Yeah.
This year with the coronavirus. So it's not the safety net like the G fund. but it's meant to be as safe as it can be because, like I said, if you're pulling money out of those funds, you can't be withstanding large losses while you're living on the money. You'll just never get that money back.
Right. You're solidifying the losses every time you take that money out. Right.
Exactly. So they're really, they play it really close to the vest and keep it pretty tight.
Yeah. Yeah. I've seen that. Now I guess with regards to the L Fund, have you seen a lot of folks in your sit downs with folks? Are they a lot of people allocated to the L Fund, or do you see a lot more people in the G Fund? I mean, what have you seen?
Most recently, of course, as we come off of the kind of the tail end of this coronavirus scare and the pandemic and what it did to the markets,
right?
I'm seeing a lot of folks that went to the G. I mean, most people know that safety is safety, but they all have different reasons why they went there. So the folks that were, maybe nearing retirement this year and even maybe had some L 2020, I've seen, start moving into the G as these funds become more even for the year, especially if they're leaving this year.
Mm-hmm.
But there's probably, I want to say the statistics, there's only about 20% of the funds in the TSP total that are even in the L funds in general. So if you look at, $700+ billion of money in the TSP, 20% of that, all totaled is what's in the L fund. So they're not as widely used as maybe they could be, but at the same time, I think people are becoming a little more educated and understanding what and how they're built. And then I think they're taking it upon themselves to build their own funds in a similar fashion. And we do that a lot. We built the Jerry Fund, the Susie Fund, and
right.
and so on, based on what they liked about that 2040 fund or whatever. And once people get a little education, and that's my big thing, as you well know, is teaching through my classes, and
right.
And once you give the federal employee the nice understanding, and they get a little educated,
mm-hmm.
they can start making their own decisions a little bit better than just trusting someone else to manage that fund.
So if any of our listeners or watchers don't know, Caine has traveled this great country a few times over, teaching classes on site at many different federal facilities, as well as doing classes for FEBA out there on the road. And, you've got just a wealth of experience in this. Let's get back to the L income or the L fund update. So when are these changes with the new 5-year increments going into play, Caine?
So typically it's summertime. That's been the general consensus. I think it was also July in 2010. I was trying to find the exact date, couldn't find anything that was solid, but it sounds like it'll be July 1st. They say July when they put anything in publications on the TSP site. So in July, that 2020 is going to roll. The 2025 is going to become available, the 35, 45, 55, and the 65.
Mm-hmm.
So at that point in time, and that's what I'm getting, and I think a good reason we're having this conversation today is that's probably been the last 30 days of my conversations with folks. I think I've got 10 or 12 text strings going, a handful of email strings with different federal employees across the country asking, hey, so when should I start looking at moving that 2020? Because I don't know if I want to get stuck in the L income. And I think that's another maybe interesting thing to point out is
sure
people just don't know, I don't want to get stuck in that account, is what I heard somebody say just the other day. I'm like, well, you're not obviously stuck in it.
Right. You
can still make those 2 trades a month, so once it rolls, that doesn't count as one of your trades.
Right.
So once you decide once you decide where you want to go, even if you haven't done it prior to the July switchover, you can easily make that change and then, go into whatever fund you want. But yeah, so come July, if you want to make that move, both those funds are a positive for the year right now. So if you were in the L 2020, moving it now isn't, a bad idea. And if you still want to if you believe the market's on this upwardly mobile trend that we've been seeing, the 2030 is still a little negative. The 2040 is a little negative. I guess in reality, the 25, 35, those won't be negative. They'll be starting at ground zero
mm-hmm.
with room to grow. So from the 2020 to the 2025 might be a perfect move if you think you're retiring in the next 2 to 5 years.
Right.
And you can do it anytime. You can do it now. You can wait. If you do it now, I think we can still probably capture some of that upward, motion of the market.
Yep.
but yeah, it's not a set in stone thing in terms of when you have to move. But come July, they will go ahead and roll that fund out, roll the other funds in.
Okay, cool. So I guess when it comes to this L income fund, I when you said the fact that the L income fund was kind of this scary thing, people didn't want to end up in it. What did you typically tell the people about their options? I mean, I know, generally I'd say you'd want to sit down with an FRC to make any sort of decision on where you're going to go post-retirement. Just those days or a year before you're planning to exit your federal service, it would behoove you to sit down with somebody that can help you educate. And I know that's what you've done for years now. So what is it that you say to these folks when they're contemplating their decisions post-service?
That's one thing that you bring up the federal retirement consultant as an FRC. That really gives us a kind of inside track to help a federal employee with their holistic picture. Their whole retirement thought. Mm-hmm. And as they start talking about moving funds, if you don't know, or if you're talking to someone who doesn't know, one, how your other benefits work, they may not give you the right information. So right. Yeah, you have a good point. As an FRC, we at least know enough about the rest of their benefits, how to take advantage of each one, which ones to maximize, which ones to limit on their way out the door. That helps us give them a little bit more specific thought and direction in terms of, okay, you are leaving this year. You did this right. You happen to be the one leaving in 2020. The fund did what it was supposed to do. Now may be the time to go to the G fund. If depends on what you're trying to do with it. Right. If you want to start living on it, that's what that L income is for. It's going to grow a little bit. It's going to potentially lose a little bit, but at least it's going to ebb and flow with you as you're spending. But yeah, we like to sit down and get a real picture of their whole package or their whole, kind of portfolio, if you will, of what their benefits look like, when they plan on taking Social Security, all those things. And like you said earlier, some folks may not even need to use these funds in their TSP for the next 5 to 10 years, which means maybe they go to the 2030 or the 2025 while they're getting into retirement. But yeah, that's kind of an open-ended question. I say it every day in my classes. I've been to a lot of different, federal buildings in a lot of different states. I've seen people that have the exact same GS grade, same salary, maybe even the same job description, but their financial situations are not the same. No matter how similar they may look, no two feds are the same. So yeah, rarely do I give the same answer to any federal employee.
It really is. It's a hard I guess that's kind of a loaded question, but it is one of those things where it's we've seen it time and time again, so many different situations, and you don't even consider like what, the married folks out there, what the spousal options out there they need to consider, and what other outside assets there might be that might kind of make you take one direction versus another direction in that retirement, I guess we'll call it distribution phase of their life. When you're starting to take monies out, which accounts should I take from first? And as an FRC, you are professionally, in a place where you can help them make a educated decision from that perspective. Now, if our listeners, our watchers want to get in touch with you, how should they do that, Caine?
Yeah, they can go to my website. It's myfeag.us or .com or .org, whichever one you happen to run into. Okay. I've got a phone number. I don't know if you've got any of my details you can put on the screen.
Sure. Yep.
They can call me. They can call me direct. Maybe I can give a shameless plug to my new book that came out here in 2020.
Yeah.
Called The Educated Fed. It's your guide to understanding and maximizing your federal benefits. You can get that on Amazon. Although I'll offer that to any one of your listeners today. If anybody calls me or gets in touch with me and wants to have a benefits conversation, I'll be happy to give them one of those for free, just for reaching out.
Well, absolutely awesome. Thank you so much for taking some time today to chat a little bit more about the goings on in the Fed space. Caine, always a pleasure to have you. We will make sure that every one of you in the show notes has Caine's contact information. If you want to get in touch, he does all of these sit downs and conversations, and will take some time to help you put together a retirement plan that works for you. He does it all over the country. Caine, thank you again for being on the show and sharing your wealth of knowledge.
Thanks, Alex. Appreciate it.
Take care. We'll see you next time on the Federal Benefits Show.